Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. Welcome to 2023. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 1 of AMC's Mayfair Witches, entitled The Witching Hour. So let me just start by saying I didn't actually plan on covering this show, and even now I'm not committed to covering it, but let me tell you guys briefly what happened. I got an AMC Plus subscription trial just so I could try to knock out Interview with the Vampire real quick before the year ended. I got the 7-day trial, like let me knock this out real quick. I do that. I knocked out Interview with the Vampire. I enjoyed it. More on that in other videos, but I thought it was cool. So I go to cancel the trial. I'm like, AMC Plus doesn't have enough content to justify, what is it, like $6, $7 a month? The library is just not there. It should be maybe like $2 a month. But I'm like, I'm not paying an extra $7 a month for another streaming service that has that's pretty bare, I should say. So I go to cancel it, and I discovered that for whatever reason, I was given a 30-day free trial instead of a 7-day free trial. So even though I canceled it, I'm still good until the end of January. And I go and open the app, and it's like, hey, special access to Mayfair Witches. And I'm like, well, I did just enjoy Interview with the Vampire, and I read that apparently this is a plan for like a universe, like, you know, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or like that monster universe that's in the movies. This is going to be the Immortal Universe. And I'm like, okay, I'm a little in on this. I enjoyed Interview with the Vampire, so let me check this show out. I checked it out. I thought it was pretty enjoyable, pretty compelling. So I'm here to talk about it. I don't know if I'm going to cover every episode. I'm kind of leaning toward doing that, but that's going to heavily rely on how this specific video performs between now and whenever episode 2 comes out. I believe January 15th will be when episode 2 would come out. January 15th is an insanely crowded day. I'm going to have an episode of 1923 that day, plus Mayor of Kingstown premieres that day, season 2, and The Last of Us premieres that day. All 3 shows I intend on covering. This will make a 4th Sunday show. So depending on how AMC releases it, we'll see. But it's going to rely entirely on how this video performs. If it performs well, I'll probably cover the whole thing. If it performs mediocre to bad, I'm probably not going to bother. But that's the opening for now. So this show is created by 2 women, Esther Spaulding and Michelle Ashford. And I think that's kind of cool. They talk about certain groups that might be portrayed in a television or film, but the film or television show or the actors in it are not of that group. And I'm not here to imply that Esther Spaulding and Michelle Ashford are witches. I'm here to imply that, it's primarily a female-led show, so it's cool to have female showrunners, just as it would be cool when you have like something that's about a Puerto Rican person and you cast a Puerto Rican person to play the role rather than making a white guy look Puerto Rican. So that's what I'm talking about here. Kind of cool to have these 2 female showrunners. I also learned the episode title, The Witching Hour, is based on the first of a 3-book trilogy about the Mayfair Witches, written by Anne Rice, who also wrote the Interview with the Vampire books that are now being adapted for the television show. So that's kind of cool. This episode title is based on that first book, and this first season is supposedly going to cover that book. So I'm assuming that if this season does well, the plan for the show is 3 seasons, 3 books. That's what I'm assuming. So, the story that was put forth during this pilot, I thought was actually pretty compelling. I'm seeing a lot of potential here for the direction this story can go. I felt like this was a good pilot. Like it was kind of like a prologue, I think, to the season. It's kind of like, okay, so here's all the major players. Here's how they're connected. Here is Alexandra Daddario's character kind of coming to the realization of who she is. And now the rest of the show is going to move this plot forward based on Alexandra Daddario's character essentially finding herself, understanding who she is, and then we're just going to kind of see how that plays out. But for a pilot, I thought this did a really good job of really laying a good foundation for what's going to come in this season, but also being a compelling episode in and of itself. I'm also interested in seeing Alexandra Daddario's performance in this role, especially as she becomes more comfortable with she being the character, more comfortable with being a witch, and presumably does witch-like shit. Once she gets to that point, I'm interested to see her performance, because I think this is an opportunity for her to show us what kind of range she has. Like, I've only seen her in The White Lotus and the first season of True Detective. I didn't see her in whatever them kids movies was that she was in. I ain't see those. But this feels like, when I say this, I mean Alexandra Daddario's kind of like position within the industry. It kind of feels like they do her like they do Sydney Sweeney, which is like, hey, let's bring in let's just give these women jobs because they're beautiful and have big tits. Like, that's pretty much what this feels like, what their careers feel like. And that's not to say that I don't think they have talent, or that I think their only service is their appearance and what their titties look like. I'm saying that I think that's why they're being hired, because that's essentially all they're given to do in these roles is pretty much be eye candy and get naked. Like, everything I've seen Sydney Sweeney in has been kind of like eye candy and get naked. Anything I've seen Alexandra Daddario in, which is just the 2 things, has been eye candy and get naked. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like for her, this could be a role that could allow her to, I don't want to say break out, because she's already very, very popular, but I think to be more respected as an actress, and she might be respected in the acting community, but I'm speaking from a fan perspective. I've only seen her do these kinds of roles, and I feel the same way about Sydney Sweeney. It's like, I feel like they should both be like, can I get a role where I have to take my titties out every fucking time? Like, something that shows that you respect me as an actress and not as a pair of tits. And like, I feel like that's how those 2 get treated. I don't like that. I mean, I like looking at them, but I don't like that set of circumstances. So I like the idea that she being Alexandra, getting more of an opportunity to show what she can do. And there is a sex scene in this first episode, and she keeps her shirt on. So maybe she said something like that. Like, look, I'm tired of being, eye candy or a trophy wife, a piece of meat in every fucking role I'm given. Give me something to work with and let me keep a goddamn shirt on for once. And I feel like that's kind of what she did. But again, this is me making all sorts of conclusions and assumptions and theorizing that could all be wrong and that are based on nothing other than that's the roles that I've seen them in. So I can be way left field with that, but I do still think this is an opportunity for Alexandra to show some range. So let's talk about this episode. Alexandra Daddario plays Rowan Fielding. She's a neurosurgeon who seems to be really good at her job, kind of like Toby Fleischman, who I've been talking about over the last 8 weeks. But she's also struggling with finding a home because she's adopted. She doesn't really know anything about her past or where she's from. She lives on a boat. She says that she travels the world searching for home. So she's very much like what they call like a hermit or something, like people who like travel from place to place. It seems like, but it does seem like she lives. I don't know if they even established where she actually lives, which is interesting. But as in what city? This episode takes place in 3 timelines. I'm going to talk about each, and then we'll kind of merge them together at the end, tie them together, I think, at the end, and I'm going to close with a couple of thoughts. So one of the timelines is present-day Rowan. Like I said, that's Alexandra Daddario's character. She's a neurosurgeon. She's good at her job. She seems to be respected by her peers, at least the one peer, I think her name was Maya, that we see in this episode. There's an operation that's about to take place on this kid, a brain operation that everyone, this kid and his family are worried about. And her boss, who is Dr. Keck, K-E-C-K. What a weird last name. I wonder where that's from. I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments. Dr. Keck uses this as an opportunity to highlight himself taking over the surgery since the board is watching. And there's also a guy watching named Daniel Limley, who we will talk about right now. I'm like, we'll talk about him later. I'm looking at my notes like, nope, we're talking about him now. Limley's doing research that, to be brief, seems to be focused on cheating death. He's doing a stem cell study that Rowan wants her adoptive mother in because her adoptive mother just got her cancer back and she doesn't have a lot of time left. Daniel Limley's kind of like your typical douchebag. He pees in front of Rowan, and of course he doesn't wash his hands because that's what we do. Like, I'm very clearly, I'm not including myself here, but in my extensive experience of pissing in public, I found that more men don't wash their hands than do. Sorry to give you that information, but that's just what I see. That's why I never touch the inside of bathroom door handles. I don't want dick cells on my hands. I'm real particular about my hands. I don't know how we got off on this tangent. Oh, because Limley didn't wash his hands after he peed in front of... So, like, he peed in front of her without saying, hey, I'm about to pee, or don't look over here, I'm peeing. He just pees in front of her. He doesn't wash his hands. I think that's like all the evidence you need that he's a piece of shit. But it doesn't really matter. He offers Rowan this job working with this research trial, and he offers to put her mom on the trial, but she has to cross a name off the list for her mom to replace, which she refuses to do because she feels like that is effectively killing a person. It's saying like, okay, this is a stem cell research to attempt to help with this cancer. I want my mom on it. And Limley's like, well, if you want your mom on it, we're set on 30 people, says the FDA. We can't go to 31, has to be 30. So if you want your mom on it, you have to choose which of these people comes off. And he's like, it's just names on a list. And she's like, no, it's patients. And I'm like, no, she has to choose someone to die. Like both of you are undercutting how important this decision is. It's not just a name on a list. It's not even just a patient. It's someone who is looking for this trial to help them live when they would otherwise die. So she is choosing, given a list of 30 names to say, which one of these people do you want to die instead of your mother? They both undercut what the nature of that conversation was. But she refused to do it. She said, if my mom saw me do it, she'd die on her own anyway. They argue about how fucked up that entire request is. And then Rowan accidentally kills him by, like, popping an artery in his vein, like, telepathically, sort of. This same thing happened, though I don't believe it killed him. After Rowan argued with Dr. Keck after he took over that kid's surgery, fucked it up, and then Rowan had to fix it. They argue about it. They actually argue about this because she wanted Dr. Keck to give, not give her a recommendation, but put a good word in for her with Daniel Limley. And the only thing I didn't like about this episode, and I have a couple of nitpicks here and there, but the only thing I didn't really kind of like, and I wouldn't even go so far as to say as I disliked it, but it was the artery popping thing. It seemed like a fairly uninteresting way to go, and the visual of like moving through a person's head and then seeing the artery kind of pop looked really kind of like hokey and cheap and just, I don't know, it was giving me big Sci-Fi Channel vibes. I don't know what to say about that. But, and I'd also expect witch kills to be a little bit more elaborate and showy, like what happens on Interview with the Vampire. I mean, and then also seeing that same kill twice in the same episode, it just kind of lame. Like, okay, it was lame when I saw it the first time. I'm like, that's not very impressive. And they do the exact same thing again. I'm like, can she at least kill somebody differently? I don't know. But yeah, I didn't really care for that. I hope that as the show moves on and Rowan becomes a bit more in tune with what she can do, that we're going to see something better than these like really anticlimactic brain poppings. But we learned that Rowan has inadvertently hurt, because I don't know if Dr. Keck died, but she's inadvertently hurt 3 people in this same way. A girl in 2nd grade, Dr. Keck, and now Daniel Limley. Also, when she does this, in both scenes, they kind of framed Alexandra's head to where half of it was completely out of frame and the other half was on the left side of your screen. And I don't know why they did that. I'm wondering, did they do that just to do it? Like, you see like this weird kind of like, misty smokiness kind of thing on the side of her head. That's where all the empty space is when she's doing this. But again, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's just like, hey, this is how we're going to show she's doing her brain thing. Like, if that's going to be a thing, doesn't really work for me. I like to see something a little bit more elaborate. And I like to feel that if they're going to frame her that way, that it needs to have some sort of meaning. So for example, she's framed that way in both instances where she pops somebody's brain vessel. What if she also has the ability to kill another way or to do something good telepathically, and then when she does that, they frame her off to the right, and then we only see that side of her? Because the side of her that we see when she's doing these brain poppings, she looks really pissed off and like she looks like she's like channeling witch energy. What if she's doing something good and they frame her off to the right? So I would like something like that just for that to make sense rather than it be something that they're doing just because they think it looks cool, which I'm not entirely opposed to that, but the brain popping thing doesn't look cool. So like if they're going to keep framing her that way, I would want to see a bit of diversity, of variety in how she harms people. So the other two timelines surround Rowan's mom, Deirdre. We see her young, I guess, by looking at her late teens, early 20s. I tried to find the actress's age and couldn't. But looking at the actress, I'd probably put her somewhere in her 20s. And then we also see an older, more muted and sedated version of Deirdre, who is 47 within the show. And we also learned that Deirdre's mom supposedly committed suicide by jumping off of a balcony, but Deirdre believes that she was pushed. So the other two storylines, like I said, the rest revolve around Deirdre. This is kind of like the molding of two storylines that we see. We see a younger version of Deirdre and the older version. So I'm going to talk about the younger version first, then the older version, and then we'll merge all three of these together. So the younger Deirdre is raised by her aunts because, like I said, her mom's dead. They're all spoken of in the plural, but we only see one, Carlotta. And she's never allowed to leave the house, presumably due to the fear of the influence of this guy named Lasher, who only Deirdre apparently sees. But Carlotta is at least aware of him existing. But he's some guy, I don't know what he is, who he does, what his purpose is, how he's connected, nothing. He just seems to be like a ghostly figure that only appears before Deirdre. And we also know that Deirdre likes him. He makes her feel special. They can communicate without speaking. She possibly is in love with him. She speaks in very vague terms about how she feels about him, but there's some sort of connection there. And there's a scene where they talk in her room and he mentions a dress. He's like, yeah, whenever your mom was feeling away, she would put on this certain dress. And he mentions her Uncle Cortland, and she moves toward this closet, and the episode, like the scene suddenly cuts to Rowan. And it was a very weird and noticeably timed and abrupt cut to the point where I'm like, I gotta put this in my notes because like, that just felt like a very strange cut. Like, I feel like it should have faded maybe before it cut, or she should have fully, like, maybe he's like, try on the dress in your closet, and then she looks at her closet and then it cuts. Or she goes all the way to her closet, we see her start to reach for a dress, but then we don't see it because it cuts. But like, where it cut was super weird. It really stood out to me. And if you notice a cut like that, then it's probably not a good cut. But anyway, this Cortland guy, we also meet him. It's her uncle, and he's clearly very nefarious. He hires this guy who if you've seen SpongeBob SquarePants, looks kind of like the handsome version of Squidward. And then the guy is ironically named Patrick, which made it even funnier. But Cortland hires this guy apparently to not only seduce Deirdre, but to also impregnate her. He successfully does this, and then we see Patrick being taken out of the house dead in the morning. Well, we don't see that. We see a dead body under a sheet. Well, we see a body under a sheet. We don't even know if the person's dead. We don't know if it's Patrick. Deirdre says it's Patrick and that Carlotta had him killed because he made her happy. But we don't know that. But we see a body taken out that Deirdre says is Patrick. Now pregnant, young Deirdre tries to kill herself. Same way as her mother did. She seems to want to jump off of a balcony, but Lasher prevents it. He says, you know where to meet me. And they meet in this room. And we learn that the necklace that Deirdre wears that has a pendant that looks like a key, it somehow binds them together. Lasher says that the binding of them together was her mother's choice, but now that she's old enough, she could choose of her own free will on whether or not she wishes to be bound to him. And once she gives birth to Rowan, we see Carlotta. Hold on, wait a minute. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something here. Oh, okay. So once she gives birth to Rowan, we see Carlotta take Rowan and hand her over to a younger version of the adoptive mother we've seen in the entire episode. The adoptive mother who pretended to have no fucking clue where Rowan is from, but is apparently like a member of this coven. But she took Rowan 2,000 miles from New Orleans to wherever the fuck, because again, I don't know if they've said where Rowan lives or not. But it's important that she never knows who she is, all that good stuff, and that's also prevented Lasher from being around her. They tell her that the baby died, which obviously Rowan did not die, but they tell her the baby died and they're going to give her a shot to kind of calm her down. And I think presumably this is the same shot that she's been given from this point on up until the opening scene with 47-year-old Deirdre, who is mute and sedated seeming. I'm assuming that this same shot, has been given to Deirdre daily to keep her into this kind of like lobotomized state. Speaking of which, it seems like a good segue to move into talking about the older version of Deirdre. And it's weird for me to call her old Deirdre, which is how I had her in my notes, because at 47, she's only 6 years older than me. So it's wild to call her old Deirdre. But technically, I'm not 41 yet. I still got 2 weeks. But 6 years older than me, give or take a couple of weeks. But she's visited by a doctor in the opening scene. This is a new doctor, different from her older one, and he's there to give her this same shot, presumably that she's been getting every day since Rowan was born. And since this doc is new, he wants to look at her file. While he's looking at it, he sees Lasher outside, who quickly vanishes. Of course, none of us knew. He didn't know, and I didn't know at the time that it was Lasher. We find that out as the episode continues. And now I want to talk about Lasher for a moment because I'm curious to know, and I feel like this is a mistake that the show made. I could be wrong, because again, this is the first episode. There's a lot to be explained here. But I'm curious to what Lasher said to her in that moment before the doctor disappears. But what I'm more curious about is the nature of what they're doing with the lighting when Lasher appears. So in the opening scene, when the doctor first arrives and he wants to give Rowan the shot, he sees Lasher outside and he comes outside. When he comes outside, it's very cold and dark looking, kind of overcast, kind of like when it rains. And he asks this nanny who's there, I'm assuming she's a nanny, it's a black lady. We don't see her in any scene other than this one, I believe. There is a scene where there's a black lady with a mask in the past. It could have been the same woman, and she's just pretending to be a nanny. I don't know. But he asked her where the man went that he saw. She's like, what man? And she says that the lighting changes. It's like the sun comes out. You know, it gets warmer, more orange. You see the sun. And that to me implies that Lasher's presence brings darkness, and then when he leaves, light can return. Is that not, like, that makes sense, right? That's what this is meant to tell us, I assumed. But later, in the scene where young Deirdre meets with him in that room and they talk about the necklace and all that kind of shit, when she first goes into the room is dark and cold. Then, right before Lasher arrives, lights come on, the fireplace comes on, and I'm like, wait, so now he brings light and warmth? Like, that's the opposite. Like, you just showed me in the opening scene that when he's around, it's dark, and when he leaves, light comes, and now you showing me that when he's gone, it's dark, and when he arrives, light comes. What? Make up your fucking mind. Like, what does this guy do? And that really felt to me like they're trying to convey one of those two ideas, and they got it mixed up. And like they didn't realize that they were showing the opposite thing in each instance. Again, could be wrong. I don't know shit. A lot of episodes left, but that's what that felt like. And then in the final scene of the episode, when Lasher is now allowed to appear on Rowan's boat, nothing happens with the light. So I'm like, I really don't think whoever directed this episode had any fucking clue what they wanted to do, what they were wanting to say with the lightness and the darkness as it pertains to Lasher. But like I said, there could be a valid explanation for that, but that really feels like, especially the first two examples, like it felt like they were trying to say something, but they fucked it up and didn't notice it. Because like if you just watch it and you don't really pay attention, you could see like, oh, okay, it was dark and it was light both times when Lasher was around, but failing to make the connection that the first time the light arrived when he left, and the second time the light arrived when he arrived. Like that doesn't make sense. But that kind of turned me up, because like shit like that don't make sense kind of fucks with me. But the doctor sees, I'm going like way back now because I've been ranting about Lasher's fucking light. When the doctor is looking at Deirdre's file, he sees a number of troubling things. Suicide attempts jumped out to me because it was really the only thing that the viewer gets a clear look at. But he decides he's only going to pretend to give her that shot going forward because he suspects it's sedating her, as do I, and he wants to see who she truly is. This is why I assumed that the shot that she was given after she gave birth to Rowan is this same shot that she's been given this whole time, because he goes like, I'm not going to give you this anymore because I want to see the real you. So like I said, presumably she's been getting sedated by this shot for 20 plus years. But the idea of older Deirdre, who is Rowan's birth mother, being lucid at the same time as Rowan is discovering who she is, that's compelling to me. So I'm interested to see where that's going. So now to kind of tie all these storylines together, like I promised at the beginning, this episode ends with a montage of like thematically tied together moments that are intercut with one another. That sounds like a confusing sentence. What we see is we see Rowan's birth mother, Deirdre, giving birth to Rowan, and that's intercut with Rowan watching her adoptive mother die. So, here's somebody being born, here's somebody dying at the same time. They're both mother figures here. The interesting juxtaposition of the two scenarios. I thought it was a little kind of like, I don't want to be insulting. I wasn't that impressed by what they were trying to say. I was kind of like, okay, I see what you did there. But whatever. Now that the doctor has taken the necklace off of Deirdre, he does that at the same time as he tells her he's not going to give her the shot anymore. It appears that removal of that necklace with the key on it has now kind of unlocked Lasher to roam. Like he's not tied to Deirdre anymore, so he can move. And the episode ends with him appearing on Rowan's boat to no warm lighting. So I'm gonna close with a couple of thoughts real quick. I'm running short on time anyway. A couple of questions. What's the significance of Rowan's relationship with this bartender? And more importantly, what's the point of him painting her as promiscuous? Like, he's like, yo, I see this revolving door guys. Like, you just let anybody fuck. Like, what? Like, why did he feel the need to bring that up? And why does the show put that in there? Like, I feel like that feels like something that's going to come back around. Like, whatever it is that, or it could just be a thing where it's like, they're trying to say that since she doesn't know who she is, that she's trying to find her home, maybe she's using men as kind of like a substitute for that. Maybe that's what that's trying to say, but we'll see. Also, are all the women who work at this agency that the adoptive mother calls to get the person, to talk to the person who was assigned to Rowan's file, is everyone there blind, or is just the woman that she talked to? And was that woman even blind, or she's have an eye thing? I don't know. I like the idea of like and I'm not saying that that's what this is, but it feels like this was what this is. Like maybe not even witches, but maybe like I don't want to say super powered, because that sounds like human, but like a powered individual foster care or adoptive agency where like they only deal in like witches and vampires and shit. Like, I have a baby werewolf. Let me send it to the same adoption agency. And then it would help if the people are blind, because they might not see. Like, this motherfucker look like a wolf. Like, I don't know. I don't know. But, and maybe I'm tripping and she just got an eye problem and she can see perfectly fine. But I'm curious if that's something that's kind of like just for the tone and the vibe of the show, or if that woman, or if that's a thing. Like, okay, they're all blind. Because, like I said, maybe it's an adoption agency for all manner of monsters or creatures or witches or vampires or mystical beings, whatever. Frankenstein, I don't fucking know. Well, Frankenstein's monster. And then Cyprian Grieve is introduced in this episode. He's the guy from this agency that's assigned to Rowan's file. He promises that he's going to take care of her, watch out for her after the mother dies, which happens at the end of the episode. He seems to have some sort of spiritual connection to Deirdre's house. Like, he goes there to verify that, essentially, I think to verify that Lasher's presence is still in New Orleans and not wherever the fuck Rowan is. And he touches this gate and he sees Lasher and a woman that appears to be hanged. And I'm wondering if that woman is Deirdre's actual mom. And she wasn't, like I said, she wasn't pushed. She was hanged, and being pushed was just the story that was given. So, interesting thoughts to close out. That's all I got. I did find this first episode to be really compelling. Again, I told you guys at the top what my plans are for potentially covering the entire season. It's entirely up to you. Share it to your social media. Be like, yo, I fuck with this guy's reviews. Whatever the case may be, if you want me to cover the whole season. But that's going to rely on what happens between now and the 15th. But I enjoyed this. I'm definitely going to keep watching it. That's for sure. And I will maybe see you guys next week. Maybe not. We'll see. It's up to you. But until then, peace.